people. Lord, develop in us a new heart inside all of us. Instill us in your sacred spirit. Help us, guide us in all things we need to learn today. Amen. Now, this meeting is being live streamed, and shortly I'm going to ask one of our councillors to lead us in a karakia. A waiata. Councillor Keith. Thank you, Councillor Keith. How lovely to have you back. Apologies. We do have an apology from Councillor Sholem. Could I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Sears, Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, please say aye.
It's from Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. And a leave of absence from Councillor Lawson. Okay. Also apologies from Councillor Ollie. So I'll just gather those all up in one resolution. So could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Sears. Thank you, Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, please say aye. And just a reminder to those watching that the councillors in the main have their papers on their iPads, which is why you will be seeing them engaging with that form of digital media. Now, a reminder about conflicts of interest as we come to the appropriate parts of the agenda. If you could declare those and behave accordingly, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, which have been previously circulated, that was September the 17th. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is the receipt of the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust annual report And we have Dr. Richard Grant here to speak to that report.
Conflict, Director of MTG.
Thank you. Yes, I was aware of that conflict too, so thank you. If you'd like to come forward, Dr. Grant, and speak to us.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I think probably the easiest way to proceed is for you to ask me questions based on the annual report which you've just seen. I should make a couple of preliminary remarks about the year. You realise, of course, that the Trust doesn't run the museum. The Trust is the guardian of the collection. But in the annual report, you'll notice two figures. One is that over 500,000 people visited the MTG last year, which is a very welcome response, not just from visitors to the province, but locals. And the second point, which is very important to the Trust itself, is that there were 5 exhibitions run by the MTG that were all based on the Trust's collections. So we had a majority of exhibitions in the MTG over the last year that were drawing from our own collection. And that's significant for 2 reasons. The first is, as you know, the MTG has one of the best collections of any regional museum in the country, and it's therefore important, we think, on the Trust that people in the Hawke's Bay region have a chance to see what that collection offers. And the second reason for it is that it enables the curators of the museum to develop their expertise based on items that we have in the collection. So those are 2 very significant numbers for us last year. The other point I should make, because I'm sure it will be of interest to the Council, and you already would have heard from Councillor Dixon about this, is the work of the Joint Working Group aimed at resolving the storage and other issues around the MTG, which have been, how should I put it, I won't say bedeviling you, but which have been active for some considerable time. On that, I'm sure Councillor Dixon and Councillor Spears will tell you that the Joint Working Group is making good progress in a good spirit with a good outcome in sight. So if I leave it there, Madam Chair, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Do we have questions? Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. I just have a couple of questions. One, I'm intrigued at the digitising of certain documents. Is that something that's been done in-house?
No, it's done both in-house and externally. Some documents are too sensitive for the museum staff to do.
Thank you. And I'd just like to refer to the annual report, if I can find my questions. Page on our reporting, page 27 on our report, or page 8 of the actual report.
Page 18?
Page 8 of
8,
the Museums Trust report. Sorry, it's one of the pleasures of working online. no, sorry, page 18 of your report, page 37 of ours. The overheads changed significantly from 129,000 in 2019 to 195,000. I'm just wondering if you're able to explain why there's been such an increase in what's been called overheads.
In that is incorporated the revised figures for the costs of providing the management services. There was a readjustment done as a result of queries by Hastings and by Napier about how these costs were attributed. And it was found that the previous year and years prior to that, the cost had not been properly calculated.
Right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Other questions? Thank you, councillor Barber.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the report. Just looking at the financials, so page 18 and 17, your net surplus is down quite a lot from last year, and I'm just looking through it due to the, you had quite a acquisition. You had quite a generous acquisition last year. How does that? How often do you get those? I mean, it's good for your financial position, but are they quite regular?
Sorry, can you just refer me to the page, councillor?
Oh, sorry. So I'm just looking at the difference between, I think it's page 18. Your net surplus was 827,000 last year. This year, 70,000. There's quite a big difference. But if I'm looking through the financials you had under the acquisition line, is that gifting or some kind of?
The donations vary from year to year, and the $800,000 was a year when we required one very significant piece, the Tony Cragg statue that's on the outside the MTG main doors, which was close to $500,000. And then there was another significant donation in there from the foundation. We would expect normally not to have acquisitions of that size, and that's a historical factor.
So it's more of a one-off that.
Well, it's a one-off in those years. You keep hoping that somebody's going to come along and do the same thing again.
Yep, no, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a comment, if I may. Firstly, I was amazed at the number of acquisitions that go on an annual basis. When you go through and you see the sheer number of them, and you realise that each of those has to be processed and catalogued and all that, you can actually see where the workload comes from. But I'd really want to thank Dr. Grant and Mr. Paku here for the considerable and valuable input in the joint working party. As far as storage is concerned and the collection is concerned, we've come a long way. We've made excellent progress. We now know where it's going. What has to happen now is how we're going to fund it and what's the governance going to be looking like. But that's the two planks that we've got. So I just wanted to mention that. There's been some superb support from those two gentlemen and the others on the trust. And it's working very, very collegiately, which we're all grateful with. And I'm more than happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you. So we have recommendations on page 9. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor O'Keefe. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and could I thank Councillor Dixon for his very positive remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to item 5, which in the paper copy is page 67. I'm going to invite Mr. Allen to speak to that report, please.
So I'll just make some opening comments if I can as Chief Executive, and take the report as read in terms of the first quarter of the financial year. I think it's worth reflecting that when we think back, to the 1st of July and where we were at, not long out of lockdown, clearly the primary focus for us on supporting our communities' recovery from COVID-19. I think we've seen a manifestation of this council's focus on priorities, investments, and our success in attracting government funding in terms of a significant momentum across a number of big areas for our community, and big investments being made in infrastructure, whether it's Three Waters, roading, footpaths, housing, the funding that's been successfully obtained that's now going into supporting 40 new jobs in terms of investing and upgrading 19 of our ngā marae in the in the Hiratonga district. And just really want to kind of reflect it's been a really big start to the year, and one that I think we can be incredibly proud of, and I'm incredibly proud of the staff. Because it has been a really significant effort, and one I'm incredibly proud of it, the speed at which we've been able to take decisions and investment decisions and actually get that converted into things that are happening in our community that are supporting our local firms, and also really importantly supporting people into employment that may have needed to be redeployed or have been unemployed as a result of COVID. So we're going to go into just a bit of a structured presentation across our priority areas. But I would like to, start right up front in saying that, the last couple of weeks has been fantastic for Hastings in terms of recognition on the national stage. So to win, the best large town was fantastic, but then brilliant to win the Supreme Award and the Keep New Zealand Beautiful Awards. And I think what that is just fantastic for Hastings, and it's a real recognition of our community, of the leadership of our elected representatives. A lot of hard work over many years from staff in the organisation, whether it be our waste management strategies, the investments that have been made in our parks and reserves, our premier playgrounds, recognition of those hundreds of people in our community that turn up and plant our trees and look after our reserves. But just fantastic to see that recognition on the national stage. And then, of course, over the last week, to see the recognition again of another major investment from the council in terms of our heritage, and the strengthening of the Opera House win the National Architecture Awards for Heritage, and then having just been advised that we've also won the National Resine Colour Award for Heritage for what we did in the Opera House as well. So to kind of have that over the last couple of weeks, I think is something that we can be incredibly Hastings proud of for both our community and the work of our governors and our staff over a long period of time. So with that, I guess that's my opening remarks, and I will hand to Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Nigel. Actually, it's probably a good point to stop the presentation after those two slides. So we will, like the last time we had this report, just roll through the 6 sort of priority areas that we have in our long-term plan, and just sort of focus on a number of key issues. Between myself and my colleagues, we'll work our way through these slides. So, Craig, do you want to add some comments to the solid waste?
Not too much to say. Obviously, the team were really rapt in terms of their input and Keep New Zealand Beautiful Awards, and a lot of hard mahi, not only from Ange and Sam and Chloe, but also from Naomi's team in terms of all that story. Probably just as an update though, we've now got a few months under our belts under the new curbside contracts, and they're really starting to settle in. We're seeing now 60% participation in the waste service at the curb. So in the first few months as people turned off their separate private bins, and the waste is stabilising across the network at about 9 kilos. For those who are involved in the waste assessment, one of the key pieces that's now though, as time goes, one of the key pieces we were missing as an organisation was a lot more detailed data, which will help us plan moving forward in terms of more targeted approach to where is the education required, where are the improvement opportunities, and also what does the next WMMP look like. So that data is starting to come together. That data has also been really useful for Greg and Paolo and the team and Danny around responding to community requests, because it's all live on a screen where the truck's been, there's photos of everything. So it just helps them triage and understand whether there's an education issue at a household, whether something's been missed and the contractor is sent back, or if someone was a bit late and Danny has a conversation, picks up the bin and has a conversation moving forward. So it's really helping us work with the customer support side. So things are heading in the right direction in the curbside space. Ongoing challenges with contamination of our green bin areas, and you've seen the updates that come through from Danny. Hope to get Pukemomo, I'm not sure if it's gone live again shortly, with the camera going up, and just managing the issues we're getting at from time to time at Waimārama or another one. So it's just an ongoing challenge that we're working through, and the team are working on some policy guidance direction for the RCB to have a think about around how we might escalate and what measures we do moving forward. The Waipariki bin is now in, so that's now a permanent one on a 1 year trial. So generally going well, just the contamination is an ongoing challenge to manage. And we're waiting to see with the change of government just around whether any of the tensions or policy directions alter with different ministers. We seem to think it'll follow largely the trajectory it was on prior to the election. Perhaps this one's a good one for Mr. Henson.
Right, Grant, can you come up and speak to this slide? So our apologies in the report that you got on the agenda. Mr. Hanson's hard work was unfortunately omitted from the written report. So we are grateful for what you're doing, Grant.
It was a bit of a test to see if anyone noticed the difference between now and 3 months ago. Good afternoon, councillors and Madam Chair. Yeah, perhaps just to talk through the list as presented on the slide. It's where our major emphasis or major work program is being undertaken at the moment. Three major components of work of the four. So the reticulation's been up and running for probably 2 months now. Those that live in or near the area or drive through the area would be well aware of that in terms of either impacts or road closures or physical works that are being done around the periphery of Frimley Park. Keen to get that work or the bulk of that work done by Christmas, and obviously once we're out on the road and in the park, we can sort of be domiciled behind a fenced off section that we've got associated with the reservoir and water treatment plant project. Councillors have hopefully a diary date on November the 19th for a site inspection, so you'll see the physical works at that particular time. Bore works are intended to start this week on site, and the reservoir, which is the photo you see there, by the time you get there, I'm optimistic that that'll be boxed and poured with a concrete pad that will show the size and location of the reservoir itself. So pleasingly, we've completed all the excavation works and removed the material, found what we expected, and have got out of the ground without too many headaches associated with sort of fairly light and fluffy silts and all those things that we get with wind at this time of the year. But we had a dream run, particularly through a 2-week school holiday period, and that all happened with no particular issues. So that's pleasing to get out of the ground, or certainly be back at ground level. The next component of work, we're just waiting for the final building consent for the water treatment plant, and we're concurrently working on all 4 elements of the project. So it's still on a timeline through to the middle of next year, with the major works associated with water treatment plant targeted for early in the new year. Wairoha, I suppose the major component of Wairoha is lodging of the resource management consent for the project 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's been accepted within HCC and has passed the checking process, so that's now in process as a limited notification. I stand to be corrected, but I understand it's on a 40-day timeline associated with that process, and hopefully the hard work we've done with our adjoining neighbours and what the number of either affected parties or supporting affected party forms that we were able to lodge with the consent will see that process go relatively smoothly. So while it's in that phase, we are concurrently, we have the 2 reservoirs in for building consent. The Frimley reservoirs on the water, I understand now, out of the UK, and the 2 Wairoha ones will be pre-Christmas. So we've had no hold-ups in terms of both getting construction and materials out of the UK. So that those 2 parts of the same contract remain on track. The reticulation design from here across to the existing bores and into the network is now in its final contract and specification phase, with the idea of perhaps tendering that before Christmas. And the water treatment plant and the Wairoha components, the education centre, are now have been packaged up in their entirety on the basis of the agreement from council to support the Wairoha project, and that's going up as a package of building consent related matters. So those all remain on track at this particular time. Coastal works, I'll just refer to my notes in terms of the update.
Can I just, Mr. Hanson, before you get into the coastal works, just to confirm for the council that the funding that we signed up to as the Memorandum of Understanding, the $15.36 million that was allocated to Hastings District Council, we put up a delivery plan to government, and that has been approved by government and is currently with the Mayor for signature and returning to Wellington. So as you're aware, that includes all of the components around, amongst other things, our water treatment upgrades. So that was another big milestone in the last week.
Thanks, Nigel. And just quickly stepping on to the coastal projects, I think I reported last time we were all but complete with the Waimarama seawall. That project's now complete, and a couple of images up there. The one on the bottom left is the, I suppose, the southern end of the seawall, and the lower right, sorry, Baden, it's a little bit distant, but the Paparoa Reserve component that I thought the contractor made a particularly good job of in terms of both protection, but also presenting the project to a relatively high standard. So that was completed on time and fractionally under budget. So that's a good news story. North Shore Road, a fairly minor issue, but Councillor Kerr just niggling away at that on the basis of having provided information to locals who are keen to look at a sort of a minor reclaim / planting project that they would have some ability to steer themselves. So I'll just step them through perhaps the consent related components to that and see where that goes. But certainly the response so far from the locals that they were keen to perhaps take that next step. Cape View Corner, a little bit of a challenging project. We've been in a position to move for a wee while, but just getting through the last of the consultative process, specifically with the Department of Conservation. Optimistic we'll have that by the end of this week. Both affected parties and iwi consultations concluded, the reports are ready to go and the application's complete. We just need to deal with some land related issues for DOC because we're traversing 3 sections of DOC land. So a little bit slow in that process because it goes to various sections of DOC, but optimistic we'll have that this Friday to lodge that particular consent. Clifton Tow Rock, it's the emergency works that sits between the existing revetment and the Clifton boat ramp, and we've assisted the Reserve Society and the Marine Club to carry out some low-level protection works, similar to what occurred in the emergency works we did for the Clifton revetment while we were waiting to get a consent for that project. So a line of tow rock at a low foundation level to provide a small to modest sea event protection. And that we've lodged the consent for that, and we're simply waiting for that to go through its process. Optimistic we might do the works pre-Christmas, the works being funded by the Reserve Society and Clifton Marine Club. Yeah, that's me.
Craig, could you have a comment on the stormwater consents?
Oh, so in the report, councillors, so the team have submitted through to HBRC the stormwater consent report. In there's a few minor non-compliances and 1 or 2 that have been categorised as moderate. So I'm just working through with the team the nature of those, but also with HBRC. And it's around the pathway, for example, where we've had an industrial private site that's had a stormwater that's flowed, product on their site that's flowed into the stormwater system and out into the network, like with beetroot juice or the likes, and working through a process where how we can actively manage that and working with those landowners and also what statutory rights and abilities we have to enforce. So we're just working through that to look to make that process workable and clarity of roles and responsibilities. There are also one or two which we've tidied up in the new maintenance contract around some vegetation control, which is around some trimming of bushes and longer grass and one of the spillways, I understand, but I just need to have a catch up with the team now that we've got the report back from HBRC on where to from there.
Thank you. We have some questions. Councillor Barber.
Just a comment from me, really. Just a mihi to Graham and Craig and the team for the delivery of the rock wall at Waimarama, Paparewa. Looks awesome. And the water treatment plant, it's progressing. I see that every day I go up my driveway. It's right there. So that's progressive. I see they were putting the concrete down today. Good. So,
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Martin. Sorry, I did gloss over, sorry, it's not on that list there. So just to comment quickly about the small communities. Hamoana is through its commissioning phase, and the stage we're intending to have water running from the plant on Monday the 23rd, hopefully earlier than that, but that's a drop dead date. And I can vouch for the water. It was delivered to me in a vessel yesterday, and all it needed was some ice cubes. So it's pretty good water. And hearing what's occurred in recent weeks around the current quality, I'm hoping that'll be a good news story once that gets turned on. So that's in a very good space. Esk Whirinaki is complete and just into the commissioning phase. The stage we won't turn it on until the new year. We're intending to keep both Esk and Waimarama on their existing supplies through Christmas and New Year, just because of the high use period and concerns about if we have any teething issues. So the projects will be finished and commissioned, but just hold off until we get through deal with the large numbers of people at Waimarama. Tipahui is through the civil works, so just waiting for the treatment plant container itself. And Waipariki, we have hopefully finalised a land deal associated with a preferred position for the site at Waipariki. So again, that's a reasonably helpful milestone in terms of delivering all of the small treatment plants within the timeframes expected, which is that early first quarter of next year. The construction of the actual treatment plants, the containers in Auckland, are all on track and largely complete. So our challenge now is just to conclude the final details on a site-by-site basis, get the civil works done, and then await the delivery and commissioning. So yeah, all of those projects remain on track, and we've got Whakatū as the last one, which we're just leaving till the new year to engage and ensure we've got sufficient time to commit the time and the design to that particular project. So the small communities overall is going very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
I've got three questions, one for almost everybody. The first one, and Councillor Corbin and I had a conversation earlier in the day, and it interested us that we prepare our annual plan, and from that the budget's developed. And then we find we revise the budgets subsequently. And the question I've got is, does that ever come back to council, that is the revision, or is that made by officers? What role do we play? So that's the first question. And since I'm on that one, could I ask the Chief Executive, the 36 million, is there a time limit to spending that, or is it fairly free? And what effect does that have on the budget? Yet, at any point, does that get added in, or is it somehow supernumerary, just an extra? And the last question for Craig is the Havelock North recycling. It would have been useful just to get a bit of an update on where that stands. So those are my three questions.
So why don't we start with Martin Place first, and then we'll turn to the other two questions.
So in terms of the recycling facility that was at Martin Place, obviously it's still closed. The team have looked at options in and around a trial at the reserve at Remains Drive. Danny's drawn up some drawings for there. There are some operational issues with that. We've also been approached with the potential new purchaser of the land where Martin Place was. And they've put a feeler out that if they do purchase the land, they may be interested in entering into a lease with council. So that's a potential ongoing discussion once any land purchases go through. So we'll.
Could I just supplement that question? What's happening to the recycling that used to go there? Where's it ending up now? Is it going in general waste collection or somewhere else?
So I don't have actual facts on that. I could follow up with the team around what's happened at Curbside. A fair amount was from the Havelock community, but also there was a suspicion, given some of the camera footage and late night bottle dropping, that some of the hospitality businesses, commercial businesses, were using that as a free way of dealing with their recycling rather than paying for a recycling service. But I'd have to talk to Danny and Angela to see if they've got statistics to see, particularly in Havelock North, whether they've seen an increase or not.
Maybe next time we could have it included. Yeah.
So in relation to the first two questions, Councillor Nixon, I'm assuming the 36 million is the 15.36 that you're talking about? Or...
Sorry, 15.36. The 36 was after the decimal.
Yeah, well, lovely to have been in 36 million. I thought we did well to get 15. Yeah, the 15 that we put up is consistent with what we talked to the council about, which is split between some of our water treatment program, plus also investments we're making around the efficiency of our network, with investment in black backflow preventers and a very small allocation that's been made to a regional set of priorities that we've all signed up to across the four councils. Basically the delivery plan that we put up, I think the fact that it's been signed reflected that we had a good plan with fairly clear milestones. And Craig, you'll correct me, but this work has to be completed by March 2022. Is basically the conditions precedent on the funding that we've got from DIA. In relation to your first point, hopefully I'm respectful enough of your role as the Chief Executive that I don't spend any money that's outside of the approvals that you've been given through the annual plan. Graham is working to an overall envelope, as has been here, for the whole drinking water program of circa $61 million. I operate to the delegations that you've assigned me. Obviously, there's a judgment around when things change but don't change the overall envelope, how much you come back to council versus getting on and implementing what you've tasked me and officers to do in terms of the objectives and the overall budget.
I guess the area I'm slightly confused about is performance against budget, because when extra money turns up, I'm just unsure how exactly that ends up in the budgetary system.
Through you, Madam Chair, if funding turns up through the course of the year, it doesn't end up in our budgetary system. It just is recorded as an actual receipt of funds, and then generally a corresponding level of expenditure. And we'll cover it in the next agenda item on that Aaron will give on a financial overview. But effectively, our revised budget generally is our annual plan that you sign off on, and carry forwards that you also sign off on. They're the predominant ingredients into the termed as the revised budget. Noting that it's a number different to what's in the annual plan. There are no other changes that are made to that bottom line that aren't made by council.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, can I acknowledge the work of the staff and our Festival Hastings winning the most beautiful large town in New Zealand in the Supreme Award, and when the staff first talked to me about whether we should put our submission in this year, and I said, well, why wouldn't we wait until the municipal is finished and our CBD's a bit further down the track and we've got a few more things ticked off, but they did it anyway, and so we're incredibly proud of And largely it's around our sustainability and environmental practices that the judges saw. So congratulations to your team, Craig. And it was a huge effort, and we are incredibly proud because the whole of the country actually looks at us and understands what we're doing and what we're doing differently. So very well done. I've just got a couple of questions. First and foremost, our Te Wanga and Homewana community have been having some major difficulties, and it's wonderful to see the new plant out there when we opened it a couple of weeks ago, but wish to acknowledge the councillors for Heritonga and Homewana, Te Wanga. I've had a lot of texts from community who are struggling with the water. Are we putting out a press release as soon as possible to tell people the date that we can get this water turned on, please? It hasn't been easy for them, and we want to acknowledge the trials that they've been through in the last few weeks. So I'd like that out as soon as possible. The Cape View Corner, could you just give us an update of that work and Mr. Hanson about when it's likely to get underway?
Yes, Your Worship. At this point in time, we're optimistic about lodging the consents for that particular project this Friday. And then we're at the whim of HPRC in terms of the processing of that consent. The Clifton revetment consent's been in, and they've asked for an extension on the 20 days as an example. And while I've had no feedback as to why, I think it's just on the volume of consents, not dissimilar to what Hastings District Council deals with. So at this point in time, I'm expecting it to probably be at least a month before we get a consent. We're in a position ready to go. I had the contractor out there yesterday that actually has $500,000 worth of rock won and waiting for the project. So there's some angst about getting through process, but that's all that's in front of us. And as I say, it's the Department of Conservation, 2 bits of land that we're dealing with just to get their final approvals. That is the last component needed to lodge the consents. So both the private landowner, iwi, and the 8 or 9 affected parties are all signed off. So it's good to go. We've just got to get through this remaining bit of process.
Councillor Watkins.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Graham, just a question in relation to Frimley Road. I wonder if you could just brief councillors just on the issues that relate to that first blue pipe getting into the ground. Does that affect the overall timetable? Just a short update on what we've found.
Thanks, Councillor. I was optimistic on the 19th of November. By the time you got there, those problems might be gone. So we'll wait and see. Yes, we're having some challenges with the first section of directional drilling. So we've opted to direction drill all of the underground related pipe work in the road sections of Frimley Road and Harpooka Street. We started with the most challenging section, which is an old bed of the Ngāraroa River. So it's got gravels that were likely to be challenging, and we've certainly found that. We've got a solution to that particular problem. So the reason we've stopped and shifted is not because of not having a solution. It's that we have run up against competing demands between the primary and the subcontractor, where they both need to be in the same location doing works, and they can't both coexist there. So we've shifted the directional drilling operation further along Frimley Road to allow open pipe works to be conducted by the primary contractor. So it's an internal issue between the primary contractor and their subs, but the reason being is they've rearranged the works to ensure they stay on track and on time. So it's a challenge they're having around particular gravels, but it was known or expected in this location, and they have a solution, but they're going to come back to that once the rearranged work program is dealt with up to Christmas.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, I'd just like to acknowledge your work with the smaller communities. I think of North Shore Road, and the issues there are nowhere near as critical as other parts in our community. But to those residents, that piece of their coast is the most important. So thank you for giving them the time so that they can find what I'd call a soft solution to an issue. Just a question to Mr. Thu. The moderate stormwater discharge consents score that you spoke of, from our point of view, are we investing sufficient in that space to be monitoring and keeping the pressure on those businesses so that they do adhere to their consents?
That's one of the potential scenarios around having enough capacity to follow through with enforcement. But the discussion I'm having with Mr. Chapman and Mr. Kneebone, and also trying to join back up with HBRC, is just to make sure we don't have 3 enforcement officers climbing over each other, and can we find some synergies to do it collegiately and together, because we all want the same outcome rather than an enforcement officer giving us an infringement so then we give someone else one. We'll come back to you if we think that's the solution, but I'd like to see if we can do it efficiently and effectively first.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up where To'o Savili left off about Supreme Award, beautiful. I got a couple of questions. I think it certainly made me proud. We're never going to forget 2020 for a whole host of reasons. But my questions are, number one, how do we intend to capitalise on that, leverage of that moving forward? And number two, the most obvious, when and how do we celebrate this?
Great question, Councillor O'Keefe. Let me start with the second question first. The answer is the 3rd of December. There will be an invite. We are looking to have a street party. This was originally designed around the timing for completion of works that you've approved, Landmark Square, obviously all the east side work that's being done to be able to, as the east side's been designed, to actually close the roads off for a bit of a party. And we thought, what better way to also add in a whole lot of things to celebrate, whether it's been the Supreme Keep New Zealand Beautiful Award winner, just the fact that we're nearing the end of 2020 and, everything that's meant to our community. So that's what we're working towards in terms of looking to celebrate it. And your first question? How are we going to leverage it? Oh, leverage, yeah, fantastic question. So short answer is what you'll see pretty soon is on all of our gateway signs, our emails. I think the opportunity, and I think Mayor Sandra, you'd raised, we've got businesses that are really excited that we're the Supreme Award winner. So how we leverage right across Hastings, and celebrate and position that brand that, we are the most beautiful place in our environmental credentials and what we're doing with waste. So we'll talk some further with council about that, but we're looking to do all of that in terms of being loud and proud about being the Supreme Award winners.
Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora. Craig, just thinking about our capacity, your water capacity for the upcoming summer. I know the Havelock pump stations is all in there, but how are we feeling about going into summer? I mean, it possibly could be another long and dry summer, and we had issues last year around our water availability. I'm talking about Waimarama because I've noticed a lot more people coming out there in the weekends, Labour weekend, so it's going to be a bumper summer.
At this stage, water consumption is okay, not trending at a particularly high level, and obviously events such as yesterday and tonight, tomorrow helps keep the grass green and reduces the amount of hose use for gardens and lawns. So at this stage, we're not looking at going early on the water restrictions, but we will need to, and Waimarama we saw 2 spikes in Waimarama this year in particular, because when COVID lockdown hit, a whole pile of people decided to work from home at the beach patch, which saw a higher than normal use. So it will be an education and awareness program, and Waimarama will go to the same level of restrictions because we have a finite water allocation and we need to make the use of it. And I guess our concern, as Mr. Henson talked about, we don't want to swap over to the new treatment plant in case there was a potential hiccup. Unlikely, but we know what we've got out there at the moment, so keeping that stable. We'll carry on with the education process. So ironically, yesterday morning, because it was getting dry, Napier went to level 2 water restrictions in the morning. So someone spited that message that it wasn't raining enough. So we will carry on monitoring. Current forecasts tend to highlight that we might get wet periods intermingled with heat, so that tends to help us out a bit. But at the moment we're okay, and we'll just have to continue monitoring and work out, push out those messages to the community around efficient water use. So also a reminder to councillors, so last year we were on restrictions because of the stress that was in the wider environment outside, but also our consent monitors the level on the Mangatereteri stream and the Irongate stream, and when they go to a trigger point, we jump up in our restriction level to try and get the urban folk to be effective and not waste as well.
Yeah, and in terms of the Havelock booster, that's put into pump water from Hastings to, is that?
So the booster will come fully into its own once Mr Hanson finishes Waiaraha, because that's when we'll do a pressure change in Havelock North, where we'll run a lower pressure in the main Hastings city, which will help us on our leakage rates because we won't be pushing the same pressures through parts of the main city. And the booster will push water up to the reservoirs. So at the moment, the bigger trunk mains between Hastings and Napier, now that we have the two pipes, particularly the new one that went around Crosses Road, that's given us extra delivery ability. And of course, we still have Brookvale running at an idle speed, and that's a discussion for council to still have at a later date, where we've tentatively talked around the option of whether that stays as an emergency site only. So if ever there was a significant fire or an earthquake and we lost connections across the bridge, that would be able to turn on. In the same way now, the Portsmouth pump station is not an operational pump unless there's an emergency, and then it's turned on. So we've slowly been withdrawing from those that have more effects to the environment. So the booster pump station isn't critical to the operation until Waiaraha kicks in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge and commend Mr Hanson for the fantastic work he's been doing, and it's a huge amount of work and sometimes under some very challenging conditions, that are unintended, but they come up. So thank you, Graham. And the other question I've got is, we're doing a pamphlet drop to the community, I think, when we do the water changeover, so we'll make it very clear to them that they need to flush their taps, etc., when the brown water comes through. I'm not sure who can answer that.
Yes, you're correct. There's a pamphlet that may have even started delivery today, or it's getting delivered this week to every mailbox in the community. I've just asked for a copy to be sent so I can forward it to all the councillors as well. So that talks through that start-up date, as Mr Hanson talked to about on the 23rd. It might be earlier. It also talks about how it'll be a stage start. So we'll start by Hamoana will stay on the existing supply and Tiawanga will swap to the new supply first. And the main reason for that is the water won't change direction when we're feeding Tiawanga. The key piece which might create some initial issues as we swap over is the section from East Road back to where the existing bores are along Beach Road, because the water will swap direction. And because the pipes have got iron and manganese in them, and when you change the direction of flow, it might dislodge things, and that will potentially have a reaction. So we just want to get Tiawanga going, and then we'll move across to Hamoana. So it talks through some of those effects, flushing taps, all the things that were talked about at the open day as well, for those who did attend the open day.
Thank you. And the other question, just to add on to that, is the chlorine-free tap. I understand that's going to be maintained at the old bore. Will that have chlorine-free water coming into it? How will that work?
I'd need to check with the team directly on how they're configuring that. At the moment, that comes off the bore head with its own UV filter on it. But as you'll know, that water has got quite a lot of organics in it, and so it doesn't taste as good. That existing water in Beach Road doesn't taste as good as, say, the Whakatū one, which doesn't have as much organics in it. So I'm not sure how much use. It'll be interesting to see what the metered use of that Hamoana.
It's a lot of use, actually, and there will be a question about that, I'm sure, which is why I'm asking now.
It's a question I asked Mr Cave the other day around what's our technical approach to that tap.
Thank you. Now, before I put the... Oh, sorry. Oh. Carry on.
So that was the first section. Actually, can you use the keyboard? My mouse has just died.
So just very quickly, and I think you're all aware, there's a lot going on at the moment, and up there in the top right, it's not to play, but you can see it on our Facebook, is the Ode to the Cone. There are cones everywhere with all of the work going on. Obviously, you're fully aware that there is a big week with speed limit bylaw review, which is multiple days, and good progress on the jobs for Hiratonga. But also, I guess, a lot of work going on regionally, not just with this council, with our neighbours, around thinking longer. If you take that jobs for Hiratonga concept, thinking longer around what does our pipelines look at. So Simon James, our regional procurement manager, is doing work pulling together the capital programs across the councils to see how do we create pipelines, so how can we create those initiatives as a continuous process. So lots on, and we're just doing some work because the reality is the scale of the capital program and some of the consent challenges and or developer buy-in to things, we will not be fully delivering a $140 million capital program. So we're just working through what is actually practical, and then how does that affect the first year of the LTP in terms of balancing that out.
So just to finish off this section on the Ode to the Cone, there is an international measure of prosperity, which is that you can measure wealth by the number of McDonald's per head of sort of population. And we are wondering, if you measured economic progress by the number of cones, where we'd be placing nationally. But just in the Waipatu area, Councillor Harvey, you'll be aware of this. I counted them the other day. There's over 500 cones just in Waipatu, with 300 metres of footpath work in Bennett Road, all of the work that's going on the state highway. There is a lot of physical infrastructure work going on in Hastings currently.
I might ask if Raoul can just come very quickly speak to this.
Damon, do you?
Yeah, just
sorry,
a
Councillor Harvey.
response to that, and it is fantastic to see the works, including the new stormwater, I suppose it is, on the left-hand side going out. And there is some signage, and that signage does have Provincial Growth Fund branding and stuff on it. But I just wondered whether we're missing a bit of an opportunity as well to actually get across what we're actually trying to achieve with a lot of where these places are.
So one of the things we're looking to tell the story around what we're doing in terms of investment in our community, the approach that we're taking around progressive procurement. Look, I'm not the most active Facebook person, but I look every day on Hastings Facebook site. So you've got video stories online of ACL construction. You're about to see it with Top Line Contracting. I think we're looking to get Dodgy on video. So we've got people out there talking about the work that's going on, the young people that they're employing, that are really looking to tell that story. And I guess all the signboards that we've done down in Waipatu on Karamu Road and Bennett Road, and that is trying to highlight that this has been a partnership between Hastings District Council, the Ministry of Social Development, the Provincial sort of Growth Fund in terms of investing in our infrastructure and jobs for our people. So that's certainly the intent, that we're working hard to try and be telling that story to our community.
Right, good afternoon everyone. So I'll, as I've been instructed, I'll make it short and sweet. I did have a 15-minute presentation prepared, but I'll truncate that now.
Got 3 minutes.
3 minutes, right, I'll speak fast. So just as a bit of a headline, so the construction industry, as we all know, remains strong. So that's for the industrial, commercial and residential space. And as you're all aware, there's still a lot of activity happening in and around the district. A lot of cool store activity in Irongate. We've got obviously CBD activity with the old Tribune site, significant investment in the health sector around Canning Road and Royston. And also in Havelock North, we've got the second stage of the Joel Road development sort of kicking into gear. So, and that's just naming a few. So that sector is still extremely strong. Retail spend for the quarter again was very, very strong and consistent. And actually, we've ticked into the other side of the equation now, where we're actually ahead cumulatively on last year. So that's where we are as of last week. As that slide indicates, unemployment numbers have increased by circa 2,000 for the Gisborne Hawke's Bay region. I think it's really important to note that year on year. But we've also had a significant increase in employment, being up circa just over 2,500 there. And the overall the workforce pool, so those people in the workforce able and are working, has also increased significantly for the region. And the commentary around that suggests that obviously the seasonal work implication, but also COVID have been significant factors in that space. To sort of add to that, which, we as officers, we're definitely keeping an eye out for, is that Infometrics are releasing their next update on the economy on the 20th of this month. And that will allow us to get a little bit more granular out in the Hastings district and what it means. So, like I say, we're keeping an eye out for that space. And finally, I think, and the Chief Executive may wish to just allude a little bit further, but obviously the labour market remains a major issue for the coming season. And I know there's a lot of work that's happening in that space by the industry to take a plan to government. So I don't know if the Chief Executive wants to elaborate further on that.
No, the council's aware of that work. So,
and just, this is not in your information that you were presented as part of the agenda, but we will put more of this into the next quarter's update. But this is just an indication of the work that's going on out at Irongate as an industrial area. Was over around 100 hectares of industrial land that was rezoned a couple of years ago now, and a lot of activity is happening out there, whether it's land that's already being consented, so it's in the red, it's sort of under, and then the blue areas of what's actually being developed. So a lot of activity going on in what we thought a couple of years ago was a very large tract of industrial land. But as far as this reporting back to council as part of the December quarter report, we'll provide a bit more information into the space, including Mahu Road and the wider industrial areas as well. As far as where we live and what's happening in the housing sense, just at a high level, the last quarter, so that spike, that's the third quarter of 2020, the level of building consents that John's team has been processing has spiked considerably, in the two different graphs that you're seeing there. One's by area, so the top graph in the orange band, that's Hastings, with rural at the bottom and grey being Havelock North. So there's the significant spike in new dwelling consents received by our consenting team in that quarter has spiked considerably. A lot of that, a fair chunk of that, has to do with Kaingora and the work that they're doing, and that can be seen in the graph on the bottom left as well. The grey area where the big spike is infill, so we're seeing a lot more consenting coming in infill subdivision and infill consent. So that's been a significant change.
And I think, as you're all aware, because you've attended the events as we've welcomed whānau into new homes and broken soil on new developments, is that pipeline that took a little while to get going is really going now, as we're seeing construction, we're seeing building consents, we're seeing resource consents, and we're seeing work being done to develop the supply out from a year from now before we'll see them as consents. But there is just a lot of activity, and I think again, as we kind of segue into jobs for our people, I think one of the opportunities and challenges for us, and I think me and Sandra had the conversation with Penny Homes, who are doing the 44 house development in Mahura, is simply one of the constraints is going to be capacity to actually do the level of construction work that's going on. But that presents opportunities as well, and that's probably the nice segue into Denise in terms of talking about some of the work we're doing in terms of jobs for our people.
So I think just in the bottom right graph as well, I guess that's in the context of the Kaingora development that's going on, but we do have that increasing number of people on the social housing register as well. So as far as things we do, Craig, just on the park side?
So many of you would have been to the great opening of the works in the playground at Ebert Park. You'll also be aware of the community process we're working through for Estelle Park, and we have another meeting tonight with the working group. Key focus of that is actually how does the community want to progress? Do they want to work it through in a reactive response, or would they like to be proactive and ask for council officers to bring to council recommendations to do a full RMP? We've done a session with the stakeholder group, which went quite well. We have the larger working group tonight, where we're just giving them a background to get all of the facts, as Rachel's put together in terms of chronology, and really a discussion and looking for their view and their perspective on what way forward would you like council to take. Sit and be responsive to any requests that come, or proactive with an RMP, and officers will report that back for council confirmation either way in December. And the current RMP is out for consultation.
And it's good to see that some children never grow up. Toi Toi is experiencing a strong demand for bookings. There's lots of activity going on, and I think actually in Aaron's financial report that follows on from this agenda, we just make note of the number of events that has been impacted either through the first lockdown or the second level of restrictions that we had just more recently. But so approximately 20 events have been either cancelled or postponed over the course of that time. So that's it's made it really difficult for the team to progress forward and build on the opening that we had in February, but we're seeing really strong demand coming through.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Thank you through you, the chair. So I thought I'd give you a... Oh, sorry. No questions.
Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just before you present, Denise, congratulations on Ebert Park, and it is an amazing transformation actually, and the community at Ebert Park have waited a very long time to get the Raurika area, in this particular area, because it's very, very special, unique, because like all of our parks in Hastings have been gifted by community, and it means a great deal to the people who really live around and use the park every day, day in, day out. The toilets are amazing, the car park's fantastic, and it'll draw people from the wider Hastings district to the park. What was really important for me that day, and I was quite disappointed there weren't more of our councillors there. I know Councillor Travis and Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Redstone were there, but actually this is our time to actually connect with our people, and those openings are extremely important, to have everybody there to celebrate our beautiful parks in Hastings. The Ebert family, and we're all there, and there was a large number of them, and it's really important to tell our story and the history of our po that are here, and the history of Mayor George Ebert and the gifting, and I'd like to make sure that we get that history up as soon as we possibly can. But I also would like to make sure, and we've asked now for a few years, and I haven't asked recently, but I'm going to put it formally now, that we get the history of our po here in our chamber written up, how it was gifted, where it came from, who looked after it and restored it, and I think the story is from Parangaho, the carvers that had to restore it in the 70s. But they have an incredible history. They are very, very precious, this tonga, to us, and the story hasn't ever been told. And to the Mayor George Ebert at the time, way back then, not quite sure of the date, but his connection with mana whenua was absolutely significant. And we've never captured that, and it means a lot to the family, and I'd like to make sure that we get on to that. I have support groups coming through all the time, and I'd like to be able to hand them something that says, this tells us the story of our beautiful po here. So, kia ora.
Councillor Barber.
Just on the previous slide to do with the housing. What's the graph at the bottom right corner there? Social housing register.
Register. That's basically the numbers of whānau that are registered for emergency housing.
Yeah, I thought so.
So yeah.
So that's going up.
I mean, for all of the activity, if we lift it up to the outcome, which is most important to from a community perspective, we know that whilst we're delivering a program, it's not making headroads into the issue. So at an outcome level, As of today, there are 1,700 whānau living in motel across Napier and Hastings. It was 880 when we started this journey in April 2019. We still have homeless, we still have a level of overcrowding, and that's why, I think the next iteration of the housing plan, can't be just a focus on, hey, we're just delivering this program, because the program in itself is not going to deal with the outcomes at a community level. But that's what that is.
No, and that's a fair point. But I think, that the other graphs there, they're quite significant progress in terms of our housing and consents. I'm wondering, even though what you're saying is probably right, those that are still not in housing are still rising. But do we track, because there has been some housing activity, kind orders have do we actually track how many families are getting into houses? So with that graph of new consents, do we know how many people are actually finding?
We do, as it relates to people coming out of like motels and off the register and going into public housing. So that's something that we can report back to council that we do with.
I thought, rather than just seeing, we are seeing that increase in. But what's the story behind some of the other stats that we see? Increase in consents. How many whānau are getting into these houses? It would be nice to be able to track that. And keep a kind of eye on that, because eventually we will start to close the gap.
Yeah,
it's a bit slow at the moment.
Yeah, but I think the picture that we're all working hard on council with our partners is it's that the housing market's dynamic. So we've got a whole lot of things going on, from Kiwis returning home from overseas. So it's quite a hard thing to get a handle on. But I think. To your point, Councillor Barber, like we know that we're only getting that activity because of the leadership of this council 18 months ago to actually get the pilot status and to be having all of this investment and program. I think it's just sobering, though, that the thing that we've been reflecting on is that the partners overseeing the program is going, but if you take up why we did this and the objectives that we put into the Hastings housing plan, which was getting our whānau out of living in motels, getting more affordable housing built. That's the things that we have to collectively, grapple with, and it's hard. But
so monitoring, and just tracking our progress, because we did receive a whole lot of money, but if we can show that there's value in this group working together, we can actually show there's been progress. What's stopping some more people coming down the
that's the next iteration. I think the conversation that we're having with the partners is going, this program's fantastic and we're delivering that program, but the program, as it was constructed, is not going to actually achieve the outcomes that we set. We're going to actually have to do more, and some of that will be, more housing, but also being really disruptive and quite innovative around. It's going to require different approaches around the products that are available as well. It's not just going to be a traditional what's an affordable house. It's going to be rent to buys and shared equities and different products that actually help our whānau, to actually get into homes, whether they're, rents or sort of purchase. So I think what we can do, which you're saying, is look, bring together some better monitoring for us to understand what's going on and how the investments that are being made are helping whānau. But I think the challenge is also that we're going to have to pivot pretty quickly into, well, this program that we're delivering is not going to, is not actually going to address the problem. So some more innovation, some more puts here would be really good.
Aroha mai, yeah. Okay, let's talk Flaxmere. So there's been a lot happening in Flaxmere recently at the community centre. So Nourish for Nil are now operating once a week on a Saturday morning from the community centre. It's really good. We were there on the first session that was there because we were doing the community engagement around the housing. So it's pretty exciting out there. And we also got accreditation through ACC for our Sit Fit classes with our kaumātua. So that was exciting as well. And then we had our first night market for those of you that attended. It was really well received by community. And we are just currently planning the next one for this month. And there's 4 more to go after that. So we're on track. So that was a really good celebration for Flaxmere. In terms of Camberley, the Breakfast Club's still going strong, so we're getting a good number of young people tuning up 5 days a week for their breakfast with Willie and Bridget, and we've just started a Kids Can Cook program, which is a really good success program as well. Hastings Sports Centre's not up there, but a couple of its successes from there is we've had 2 really good chess competitions with our rangatahi. So I don't know if you've been to see it or not, but it's actually quite exciting seeing the stadium all set up, the chairs all set up, and then the young people are in there doing the chess. I'm not a chess player, but I got quite into it, so it was quite good to watch that happen, and it's very competitive. And we're also working with our RSC workers, with our Whakamasima group, to run a fitness program with them. So that's been well received as well by our RSC workers. In terms of Splash, we are open and on track to open next week on the 16th of November. Yay, we're really excited, looking forward to the season. We had our blessing yesterday with our 60 young people that are going to be working there. And yeah, we're on track, so ready to get that going. And then our summer pools, we're on track to open them at the end of November as well. Our young people, so for our youth council, we had a meeting last week, and for them, one of their main highlights was actually to be able to sit around the table with you guys in the subcommittee meeting. I hope you're enjoying having them at the table. They're a very strong group this year in terms of advocacy, and they're not afraid to speak up, so we've enjoyed working with them. I hope you have as well.
Just on that, can you please pass our thanks back to them? I can speak for the District Development Committee. We had a joint committee, unfortunately Eileen's not here, but great communities as well. And the young people that came, the questions they asked were different questions that we asked, and very much enjoy having their input. So please pass it on to us.
Thank you. And then they've also had representation on the Waiaroha project and also on the Active Transport Committee. Our Youth Potential Awards were held on the 28th of September. We had Israel Dag as our guest speaker, and we had some amazing dance performances by our Respect dance crew. So it was a really good evening. And our youth employment approach, so I nearly have a full team on board. We just have 2 more positions to fill. We are struggling to fill the Hinenaro connector role. That is a hot position and hot demand at the moment. So that's someone with a clinician or a mental health background to help our rangatahi. So I've partnered up with the DHB, and we're going to look for a position with them as well, because they're also struggling to fill those roles. So we're on track in there, and the team are really excited. The shop's going really well, and our caravan should be up and going by December, hopefully. That's it.
That's nice, Madam Chair.
Right, thank you. We have a recommendation to accept that report. Oh, sorry, Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, Chair. I know I don't want to go and hold up the meeting too long, but congratulations to the team. Some of the work that, all of the work you've been doing that we've attended these great events. I'd love to think that we're invited to the media, to them all, just to tell our story, just to capture some of the Israel Dag night, the Youth Potential night, all those amazing things. People want to know. That's our good news. That's what we are doing, that we can, be proud of and celebrate. So I'd love the media to be invited to all of those events. And likewise with Splash Planet, why wouldn't they come along to a blessing and just get ourselves prepared and just work connectedly to tell our story about Hastings. And our Splash Planet is unique in New Zealand. Some other people have tried to copy, but we're the best. So, we just got to get out there and just be proud and just keep telling the story about all our great things. And you go about your business and get it all set up and do all your hard work, but we need to be part of this. We want to be part of, the great things that are going on as well. So, thank you to the team, Denise. And we have got a meeting arranged, because I did attend the hui with our MP, and I looked the other day, and our MP Meka Whaitiri about Camberley, with a whole lot of our partner agencies. And if our community centre is going to change, we need to have a really strong plan around what that looks like. And we need a structure around how we can improve and how we can, there's a staged approach there, and we need to look at how we're going to do that. So whether we do it in a community in a committee structure or how we're doing it, but we need to be, very much involved in. There's some great progress happening and some wonderful work happening in Camberley. We need to be able to keep it going and work in that partnership rather than just a couple of people doing it. So, thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on page 68, but before I put that, I would really like to commend to my fellow councillors this report, which is such a good summation of everything that the council has been doing. If you have a hard copy of it, please keep it until the next time the next one is issued, because basically most of the queries that come to you from the residents, the answers to the questions that they will ask are contained in this report, or should be. That's the vision for it. So today we've had a suggestion from Councillor Barber as to additional information that could go in there as to successes in terms of people coming off the housing register. So if you have other suggestions for things that would be worthwhile and contain the information that you need to be able to be responsive to your constituents, then please feel free to suggest, because it really is a work in progress, but fantastic work from the team who have been feeding information into that, and lovely to see Louise Steckner here, because she's been doing an awful lot of work. And I would particularly like to, a particular hobby horse of mine has been the glossary of terms, and I was very proud to see that there is now a glossary of Māori terms that are included in this report, so that we can all be learning all the time. So do I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Thank you, Councillor Redstone.
May I just speak to that?
Yes, feel free.
I would actually like to reiterate exactly what you said, because I wasn't at the last Ops and Monitoring meeting, but it was brilliant having the report to be able to dig into. So I too would like to see this not just a report that we look at once every 3 months, but it's actually a report that we use as our reference document for the next 3 months till we get the next report.
Exactly.
Such a lot of work goes into this. Louise, it reads really well. It's an easy read as opposed to too sticky. So just like to reiterate and very happy to move it.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Councillor Redstone. Yes, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. And now we'll move on to Aaron. Item 6.
Good afternoon and welcome to the, I hope you can all hear me, to the first quarter financial result for 2021. Okay. So the accounting result shows a $2.2 million favourable result for that for the first three months, and that's primarily driven by the underspend in operational expenditure. That's quite a good result, and it's quite nice to actually be able to present a quarterly that is in the black rather than the red for the last, I can't remember how many quarters. Although yesterday gave me pause for thought when I thought 10 hours of rain can turn this around really, really quick. If you look at what happened to Napier, last night. And also with COVID still lurking around the edges and getting bigger overseas, it's kind of a case of holding your breath and hoping it stays. Just going through to the revenue side of that. So revenue was $512K favourable, pretty much driven by a gain on sale of land, which was the Orchard Road property that we sold. Also favourable there was landfill and interest received on term deposits, which we have. Offsetting that was some capital subsidy money that we haven't received, but there's an offset in expenditure as well, because if you don't receive the subsidy, you don't incur the expenditure, so that's a sum zero game, if you like. The fees and charges were slightly under, but we'll talk about that in this next slide, because COVID-19 is still having a lingering impact on the first quarter, in terms of the fact that there was level 2 plus some of the stuff that was lingering from the last quarter of the prior financial year. Toi Toi, as Mr. Allen previously alluded to, I think had something like 37 postponements or cancellations in that quarter. So that's obviously had quite a direct effect on their numbers. In terms of Learn to Swim, also that was a similar issue where there was quite a few cancellations there, and that's you look at last year, I think in the same quarter, and it was around 58k. That's down to it's 85k, and that's down to around 56, 57k. So you can see just by making a comparison as to what that kind of number was looking like. The government, as you may remember, extended the renewal period for motor vehicle warrant fitnesses. Means that lower infringements from the parking were given out for that sort of thing in this first quarter as well, due to the fact that people, weren't infringing if the government had given them the extension. So that's where the COVID impact has been in the first quarter. Through to expenditure, which is, as I say, around the $1.7 million favourable, mainly driven by lower contracting costs, expert advice, consulting fees. Likely to be that this will start to catch up in that second quarter, and maybe the third. Generally speaking, it's driven by what projects are underway, what projects have been held up, where they're sitting. Yeah, I would expect to see that start to catch up in that next quarter. In terms of council capital spend, 24 million is the budget for the first quarter, 15 million is where we got to. We know, and you have just heard today at this meeting, the amount of work that's actually being carried out in terms of capital. The budget is really big. It's $140 million, 30 million of that is carry forwards from the prior year. And yeah, that could be really interesting as to where we get to, as Mr. Thu alluded to earlier as well. So, but as you have heard from the previous report, there is an awful lot of work that is actually being carried out across a lot of those big activities driving the capital spend. Treasury, the gross borrowing is 165 million for the first quarter. We borrowed another 15 million in terms of new loans drawn. We have $20 million worth of term deposits, which is effectively sitting on our balance sheet as pre-funding, and it's to support the big capital program that we're undergoing in the current financial year. So, yeah, it's an ongoing thing. We're expecting, with the amount of capital that we are planning to spend, that we will be borrowing further in the next quarter as well. Are there any questions?
Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One is related to what Councillor Nixon referred to before, which is on page 70. Just the terminology of year-to-date revised budget. Is the budget the budget? And are we revising the budget? And if we're not revising, why are we calling it a revised budget?
So, by and large, I'm sorry.
I think, as I sort of iterated to Councillor Nixon earlier, we do have, when we refer to our budget, it's the annual plan. It's what you sign off on is through that process, or year one of the LTP. When we report back to you, we try and incorporate other decisions that you've made. The most significant of those is the approval of carry forwards that get brought forward from the prior year. So it's either rates funded carry forwards, stuff we budgeted to do last year. We collected the rates to do that, and never quite managed to do that work. But we carry that funding forward. That gets included into what we refer to as a revised budget. If there are other significant decisions of council throughout the year, we may add those into the budget, but generally we don't. It's normally, when we refer to the revised budget, it is the annual plan that's signed off by council and the carry forwards.
So if there are other adjustments made during the year, what do you call that budget?
Typically, we don't call it a budget. It's just a variance to budget. So, for example, the Crown Infrastructure Partners funding that we know that we're going to receive, some of it during the financial year, that'll come through as income and a corresponding level of expenditure. We won't have that as a budgeted item, but we will report against it as being a variance to budget.
Thank you. And my second question is also on page 70, and it is revenue from planning and regulatory and development contributions. And I note that there's a timing difference in the revenue, but I just want assurance that there's not a variance between revenue and actual cost, because last year we spent a lot of time addressing the fees for that, because there was a significant variance between revenue from it and the cost of it. Is there assurance that we have got the revenue cost part of that right, besides the timing part of it?
So I'm wondering, Councillor, if there's two parts to that question. Are you referring to the first bullet point on 4.5 or 4.8?
Both of them. Yeah.
So as far as 4.8 is concerned, so that's separate to the regulatory function of consenting. It's the development contributions that developers pay as far, development contribution through development contribution policy for new works. That work is historically very difficult for us to budget and phase throughout the year, because we don't have control over the timing that developers will do that work and lodge their consents and pay their development contributions. So that work is more aligned to the investments that we're making in infrastructure to enable growth going forward. The second part is around the planning and regulatory services, and I think, Mr. Wilson, have you got some comments on that?
Yeah, and in terms of that, because we added more revenue into the budget in the current year than was in the previous year to better reflect what the actuals were doing, and so as a result, you tend not to get that huge variance that we had in the prior year. Does that make sense?
I think we'll bring some more information back on that one.
Yeah,
Councillor
we can
Corbett.
do that.
That would be great, but also on the development contribution, they're actually recovering the cost of the services from the development contribution as well.
Yeah.
And that's a much longer time frame. We generally look at look at that over like a 15-year time frame of putting infrastructure in. If we think about Lyndhurst, for example, as a subdivision, we'll put the infrastructure in to enable that subdivision to happen, and we'll be collecting development contributions over the life of that subdivision to repay that works. But we can bring some more information back on that.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Just on 4.26, I mean, capital spend year to date is 15 mil. We were projected to spend 24. I know it's early in the financial year, but we projected to spend 140 million capex. I mean, are we going to catch up? Are we going to catch up to that? No, I didn't think so.
No, so we're if we take this back to what did we deliver last year, which was our biggest capital works program at 76 million. The reality is we're not going to deliver 140 mil, and that 140 mil does not include all the Crown infrastructure funding for the you know, the infrastructure for land development. The work that we need to do and bring back is what is the doable capital work program for this year. I think we have confidence, and you know, you will take from Mr. Hanson's presentation, we know there's going to be some large tracts of capital spent on our drinking water program this year, but we're going to need to bring back a revised capital works program because we don't have the ability to deliver it, and the reality is I don't think there's the market capacity to deliver it, and I don't think it would actually be the right thing to try and spend $140 million in a single year.
The reason I ask the question is that when we get to setting these budgets, especially got 30 million carried forward from last year, you know, I think we just have to be kind of realistic about what we can actually do, because it just looks like, you know, when there's such a big gap between what we say we're going to do and what we're actually doing,
I think there's a level of ruthlessness that needs to go on inside the organisation over the next, in the run up to Christmas around our capital works program. We're certainly doing that, and you'll see that when we have our workshop in December on the LTP. I think there's always a level of optimism bias around what we can deliver, and seemingly going to deliver everything, a bit like the conversations that are going on internally at the moment on the LTP, that somehow we're going to deliver everything in year one. And there's just a bit of reality and stress testing that we need to do on this. I think we are going to deliver a big capital works program, but it's not going to be anywhere near, you know, 140 million. And when we've got to factor in the Crown infrastructure investment that comes with conditions precedent on timeframes we need to spend that money, you know, we're going to need to bring back a revised capital works program.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on Councillor Barber's question. How do we ascertain, or do we ascertain, what our capability is for meeting capital budget programs, so that we don't sort of fall into the trap, which seems to have gone on for several years now, as I think Councillor Barber would agree, that we've sort of failed to meet budget. I mean, some of it, I suppose, is outside suppliers, but a lot of it seems to be internal. So how do we stop doing this every year?
Well, I think with respect, we try and build on what we did last year, which, as you know, I mean, I think when you fall into a trap around just taking everything as carry forwards that you haven't done and then lay big new capital works program on top of it, it's not real. Last year, I think we actually applied a level of rigour in terms of stress testing the carry forwards and new capital works, and actually had a capital works program. As I say, whilst we were under, I think we were circa around 100 million last year and delivered 76. But we need to do the same thing this year, and we need to do it also in the context of, and this is probably more the LTP, but rightly, the Audit New Zealand and the Office of the Auditor General, one of the tests that they're applying is a doability and a reality test to the capital works program.
So does this mean that effectively we might be overcharging either in consents or rates or anything else, or even borrowings, ahead of our ability to provide? You know, should we be looking at that as well?
No, I don't think we're overcharging on that basis, and I think last year's financial result and the year before is an indication of that. We're not delivering massive surpluses, which would be the outcome if we were overcharging and collecting more rates than we needed. So, no, I don't believe so.
Thank you. I have a recommendation on page 69 to accept the report. Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Thank you, Councillor Barber. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Moving to item 7, which is the report under Mr Allen's name about the Hastings COVID recovery plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the third time we've reported against the recovery plan that you adopted while we were in lockdown. And I think a lot of actually what's in here and a lot of what we've captured in the recovery plan and what we're now reporting against is determining, you know, pretty much business as usual work for us as an organisation. So in the future, I propose that this report will come back in a much more streamlined fashion. But Unfortunately, Mrs. Peacock Coyle, our manager at Toi Toi, is unwell today and would have been able to talk to the Arts, Culture and Events Recovery Plan much better than I, as it's detailed, as it's detailed in this report. But I think what we're taking the opportunity here is to provide you with a bit more information, a bit of a report back on the decision that you made earlier in the year to fund the Arts, Culture and Events Recovery Plan. There's a lot more detailed information with the dashboards, particularly around the economic and community recovery programs that were put in place following the adoption of the plan. I'm really just happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
There's a big red box on page 88. So my understanding of that is not that there's something gone wrong, it's simply we haven't done the first benchmark. This is monitoring and evaluation, survey community to benchmark levels of wellbeing. So the big red box is just simply saying we haven't been able to start this, rather than something's gone wrong.
Can answer that through you, the chair. Yes, that's correct. And we did think about doing one when we came out of lockdown, but it wouldn't give us a true reflection of what we were after. So we probably will not be able to get that one past the post. Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, is this something that, rather than reporting looking like a negative, is it something that we could extract from this and recalibrate and start again at the appropriate time?
That's right, and we'll I think we'll refresh this reporting going forward, so it's not quite in such a detailed way, but more reporting on exception basis and achievements.
Thank you. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I think it would be really helpful to get some of the Mayor's Task Force information in here as well. I think that there is a wider aspect in this report that is missing for us. Yes, it's our community wellbeing. Yes, it's arts and culture, but actually some of the things that are largely missing are around employment, and I think that we need to connect the regional perspective with our perspective and have a more thorough. We want to kind of be saying we've got a bit of money left over. How can we best spend it to maximise the impact of the wellbeing of our community? And that we know that's around employment. So I think that yes, it's nice to have the nice to dos, but actually there's some real grunty stuff here that's missing. We want the information from the industry. Where are the shortcomings? Where we can see we can plug the gaps. The information around how we've supported the sports clubs, that needs to come out of this fund. Do you want a recommendation in here to show that that is actually out of the COVID fund instead of, at the moment it's sitting in general budget? So I can put a recommendation to add to this to say, in terms of us tidying some of that up, because this is a COVID response. This is yes, we're delivering our infrastructure. That's our role. That's our what we have to do this year, and it's people and jobs. But I'm far more interested in the wider good for the district, and actually what money have we got left over that we had budgeted, and how are we going to use that? And is it some small businesses that might need some support through the new hub? I want some really big grunty thinking around economic growth in terms of, who can we help? So, there's some things that popped up that we could say that we needed to help some people, and we've done that. And so where does the balance lie? And that's the information that I'd like to see captured. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through Madam Chair, we'll report that back. Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this point in time, I don't think we need a specific resolution around the funding for the sports grounds. I think there's an opportunity for us to absorb that within our operations. We do have an operational contingency as well that you put in place. So I think we'll try and manage it through that and leave that funding that you have intact. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering why the Economic Recovery Program is under a COVID response program. When I look down here to page 90, which is on there, I'm looking at the Brookvale Development Area Resource Consent Application for Stage 1 expected to mid-2020, and it's got a concern alongside it. Is this the appropriate forum to actually discuss this, or should we do it at another stage?
I think that is more of a deeper conversation that needs to be had probably at the district development subcommittee level around when responsible officers aren't here to go to give you a more detailed explanation into those spaces. So.
Yeah, that's why I could see that there was no one around that was available to answer that. So, but why is that in this particular document, COVID recovery?
There are a number of actions that were incorporated in the recovery plan that you signed off on in May that were specifically aligned with those outcomes. And when the officers looked at those more generic and general outcomes and drilled down into them, they were the sorts of actions that we knew that we needed to put a higher level of emphasis on to deliver those works to help our community going forward.
And so those where you've got concerns marked, are they still applicable as a concern?
There are concerns around our ability to deliver on them in a timely fashion, given there's a number of factors that are external to this organisation that we don't necessarily have control over, but they are still concerns that we have because we know that those outcomes are important for the community to deliver on.
Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on page 84. Would someone like to move? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, moving on to item number 8, which is request received under the Local Government Official Information Act. Unless anyone has any questions, I would just thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Thank you, Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. And I would like to declare this meeting closed, but I'll just finish with a karakia.
Sorry,
A question. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Where do we see the responses to the Lagoimas where we have had in the past? Are they back in online somewhere, or because they tend to be things that it may have been the first point of call may have been a councillor in the first place and then gone through, but also there's just things in there that we may actually be asked about, and I'm just not sure. It's all good recording them, but I just want to know where we can find the information about them if we're asked.
It
should be on the hub. I'll check whether that's been updated recently, but we were
Publishing everything to the hub.
Publishing everything to the hub.
Thank you. We'll finish with a karakia. Ko mutu a mātou mahi mō tēnei wā, manakitanga mai mātou katoa o mātou hoa o mātou whānau, ai o ki te aorangi. Our work is finished for the moment. Bless us all, our colleagues, our families. Peace to the universe. Thank you.
And we'll
And we'll have a cup of tea and then we'll come back for an informal.